For different reasons globally, there has been a push to green tech. Everyone is going towards electrical vehicles, going to solar, where you use batteries as the storage. But there is a problem with this push, and that problem is that these batteries are built using different components. And a lot of the time, there has been a school of thought that says that these components that are used in building these batteries are not clean. Today's guest on Green Tech Pulse is solving that problem. Today's guest is Greg from Alaska Energy Metals, and he'll talk about how he's solving the problem of securing critical clean metals for this green tech push. So, welcome to the show, Greg.
Well, thanks very much, Peter.
Okay, so now you talk about critical metals, so critical minerals. So, for those, the listeners, the watchers that are new to this topic, what are these critical minerals and why are they called critical?
Right. Well, in the United States, there's a list, and there probably is in Canada and Europe too, of metals that are listed as critical and strategic metals, and for various reasons, they're strategic for the country. But in the case of metals that are used for electrification, then they're crucial. If we're going to electrify our society, that means transmitting and storing a lot of electrical power, and that's done with metals. And so, metals like nickel and cobalt are critical to battery storage.
Okay, so nickel and cobalt. So, when we talk about nickel, cobalt, why are they so essential? What parts of the battery are they used in? Yes, something like that.
Yeah, they're used to manufacture the cathode of the battery, and in the case of nickel, it's especially important for providing the range that the battery has. So nickel chemistry batteries last longer and therefore can move the vehicle further. It has a higher energy density, that particular type of chemistry. So in America, that's one of the biggest concerns that drivers have is the range of the vehicle because we have fairly long distances to drive. And not only that, but it can be cold in places, which affects the range of the vehicle too. So the nickel chemistry is very important.
Okay, so now for these minerals, you say the US government has listed them as critical minerals. So what has been the change in these recent years that has made these minerals such a hot topic and critical, like you say?
Right. Well, for the United States, I mean, the country is really just realizing again that these metals are extremely important for electrification of society. But the United States has given up its metal supply chains all over the world, and furthermore, has not done anything to encourage production of metals in its own country. So it offshored a lot of metal production, but then didn't really pay attention to it. But at the same time, China, I think, had a vision of the future and worked very hard to secure metal supply chains all over the world. And in some cases, they have an absolute lock on these supply chains. They control the market. And so for the United States, yeah, these metals are critical and strategic, and the country's vulnerable.
Yeah. So now you said China has a majority of the supplies of these critical metals. So what risks come out as a result of this concentration of supply on one country for, especially for the clean energy goals we have globally.
Right. Well, a couple things. First, there's the security issue. I mean, China has shown that it's prepared to weaponize metal supply chains in trade disagreements, or even could come to a trade war. We've got a new administration in the United States that is threatening tariffs on a variety of goods as leverage, but China has a lot of leverage too with the metal supply chains that it's established. And so, that's a security risk for the United States. But the other aspect is the environment. And, in the United States, North America, Europe, we have very strong uh, environmental regulations and ethics. We produce metals very responsibly, but that's not true everywhere around the world. And right now, I think Indonesia is a good example of that. Indonesia is blessed with uh, lots of nickel, for example. And with China's assistance, uh, in the rapidly growing demand for nickel has ramped up production, put lots of new mines into production. Indonesia has insisted that the ores be processed in their country. And so China has helped them build smelters, refineries, and whatnot. But the environmental regulation is not strict there. And, so they're really, from what I've read, not being there personally, but from what I've read, really running roughshod over the people that live nearby and running roughshod over the environment, not following best practices. And furthermore, it's highly energy intensive to separate the nickel metal from the ores. And Indonesia makes a lot of its power by burning coal. So it's completely counterproductive for us to be using nickel metal batteries in electric vehicles to prevent carbon dioxide going in the air when the source of the metal is refining using highly carbon methods.
Yeah, so I think we end up using batteries, electric cars powered by coal when you look at the what you just described. So now looking at your business, how are you solving this problem of providing or producing this nickel in a more clean manner?
Right. Well, number one, our deposit is in the United States, and so we follow, American environmental laws and regulations, which are strict. And so, metals produced here are responsibly produced, protective of the environment. But an interesting aspect of our deposit is that in processing of the ore, it's possible for us to capture carbon from the atmosphere. The type of rock that our deposit, it's primarily a nickel deposit, but it has other metals as well, including cobalt and copper, chromium. But the type of rock that hosts our deposit reacts spontaneously with the air. The magnesium, these are high magnesium content rocks that spontaneously react with carbon dioxide in the air to form magnesium carbonate. Thereby locking that carbon dioxide into the rock. As part of the processing of these types of ores, we need to crush and grind the ore to a very fine powder, about the consistency of baby powder, for example. And so you can imagine that exposes all those little tiny mineral grains to the atmosphere. And so potentially we can capture, sequester a large amount of carbon dioxide using the waste stream from a mining operation. You should understand, Peter, at this point, we've discovered a deposit. It's not a mine yet, but potentially it will be. And this would
Okay.
be, you know, a positive side benefit to mining the deposit in this method.
Yeah, and I think looking at that carbon, doing the carbon capture method while mining too, it has double benefits because that way you're doing the opposite of burning coal. You're taking the carbon back into the ground and you're still providing the metal. So now looking at this deposits you discovered, um, considering the scale of demand for this nickel for especially EV batteries in the US, would you say the scale, the size of the deposits would be able to satisfy this demand?
No, not at all. We have a large deposit, and potentially it could produce a lot of metal, but certainly wouldn't be enough for the United States. You know, the reality is that under our current uh, Inflation Reduction Act, metals going into electric vehicles are supposed to be sourced from free trade countries, countries that share free trade agreements with the United States. But the reality is that if all of the countries that have a free trade agreement with the U.S. were to send all of their nickel to us, it still wouldn't be enough. So the amount of
Whoa.
metal required in this electrical energy expansion is truly astounding, and most people have no real understanding of this. But the projections are uh, that, for example, with copper, if we are to truly electrify our society, we're going to have to mine more copper in the next 20 to 30 years than has ever been mined in the history of the earth. And the same is true with other metals that are used in electrification.
Okay, so now you said if all the countries with the free trade agreements with the US send all their nickel to the US, it won't be enough. So I think we are talking about really a really huge scale. So can you help the listeners understand what type of scale we are looking at for the supply of these critical minerals you talk about?
What type of skill is the
Yes,
question?
like how large the demand or
Oh, the scale,
the needed,
yes.
yeah.
Well, I don't know the numbers for all the various metals, but certainly just on electric vehicle demand, it's anticipated that by 2030, so just 5 years from now, we'll have to triple the amount of nickel that's produced on Earth in order to meet that
Whoa.
demand, just for the batteries. You know, nickel's used for all kinds of different purposes. Its main use is in the manufacture of stainless steel. By 2030, it's anticipated that the amount of nickel consumed in production of batteries will equal the amount that's used every year for stainless steel. So I mean, the demand in nickel is growing every year in double digits, and it's going to become more and more and more.
Okay, so now I think that brings me to another question because when we say the demand is going to keep growing, because I know currently the amount of electrical vehicles compared to the amount of total vehicles is a really small percentage. So let's say we're looking at electrifying the entire vehicles on the planet. Is this sustainable? Is this something that we can sustain long term?
Well, I think it is, but things are going to have to change, and I think they will change. I mean, Indonesia right now is realizing that wow, we're really making a mess of our country, a beautiful country, and so there will be changes made. Uh, but to mine as much metal as is needed to ramp up that quickly, there's bound to be problems, and there is right now in places in the world environmental degradation because of the rapidly expanding mining industry.
Yeah. Okay. So now, I think one other thing would be by the time this episode is out, there will be a new administration in the US. We are recording in December 2024. So there's been talk, like you also mentioned, of tariffs and everything. So how do you think this would play in? Because one of the biggest targeted countries for the tariffs is China, which you said is the biggest source probably of this nickel and all that. So how do you think these tariffs, the changes that are going to come with this new administration, how do you think they're going to play in this mineral space?
I find it pretty hard to predict how it's going to turn out, Peter. You just don't know, and there's so much geopolitics at play. Um, there's quite a spectrum of scenarios that could come about from outright trade war with China, where we just don't accept any of their products, or they don't send us any of their products. There's just no predicting. But what I do know is that the U.S. is quite vulnerable right now because it could get cut off from these supplies very, very easily.
Okay, so now there's
And sorry, Peter. Even worse,
yeah.
I'm old enough to have lived through the energy crisis of the 1970s that happened in the United States, and it truly was a crisis. America was really, really reliant on Middle Eastern oil at the time, and it got cut off. And there was no gasoline at the pump, and that doesn't go over very well with Americans, let me tell you. So now we're transitioning to electric vehicles, but the country is far more reliant on imports of metals right now than it ever was for oil. And metals are used for more than just powering vehicles. This is a new use, but metals are just such a crucial part of our society. And if those supply chains are broken, America's in trouble.
Okay, so now I think let's go back to mining because your company's has a mining operation. And one thing we've seen about mining most times is each time there is a new mining operation about to come up, you have environmental groups coming in, wanting to stop it and not wanting it to go ahead because they feel it's going to damage the environment, no matter how how it is done. So, what would you say about that kind of situation coming up, especially since your mines are in the United States?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Nobody seems to want a mine in their backyard. But the reality is, it's better in your backyard, especially when we're in North America, because the laws and the regulations and the ethics of the companies demand that we do everything responsibly. And the modern mining industry in North America is excellent, very protective of the environment. There's always some risk. It's inevitable if you have an industrial operation of some accident, but our industry really does a good job of protecting the environment. It's much, much different than it was in the 19th century, that's for sure. So, I mean, I think that's the answer is to have the highest level of ethics and responsibility where we mine, but also demand it from other countries around the world. You know, I look at investment companies like, for example, BlackRock, that demand that the companies in which they invest have the highest level of ESG standards. And so car companies, for example, in which BlackRock might invest, also have these ESG standards, but the metals they're accepting out of necessity and out of the necessity to make profit, they're buying metals or components that were not responsibly sourced. And so I think we have to push back and demand that Indonesia mine and refine responsibly. Bring the world up to the standards that we've established in North America over the decades.
Okay, so now for this environmentally responsible mining that you talk about, doing it in a way that doesn't harm the environment. Do you have any success stories of companies that have done this, or even for you, so listeners can relate something listeners can relate with?
Sorry, you mean examples of mines that
Yes,
have lived through their life
environmentally,
and
yeah.
show that yeah, I think there's lots of modern mining operations. Certainly, several that I can point to right here in Alaska. A sensitive environment, but all our major mines here are very protective of the environment, and no, just beautiful examples, create all kinds of wealth. But there's no, in some cases, the quality of the water draining from the mine environment is better than it was before there was a mine.
Well,
There's metals leaching from the deposit at surface, polluting the water downstream until the mining company came along and started mining and controlled that contaminated water. So, yeah, I think there's fantastic examples all over the world, and particularly here in Alaska for responsible mine operations.
okay, so now in this, I know technology makes everything better and it's making everything better. So in this sustainable mining space, what are the most exciting innovations, the new technology, the new practices that you've seen that excite you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think AI is an especially exciting thing. I mean, I think that what may be accomplished is truly astounding. It's got its risks, but what I do know is it requires an awful lot of metal to do that. But AI is transforming our society at a very rapid rate, and is likely to do so a lot more going forward. But metals will play a crucial role in that, the raw materials that go into this.
Yeah, I think AI is really changing everything. I think even in every business, everybody I've met has a different way they're using AI, and it's just it's amazing. It's totally
Mhm.
amazing. So now you talked about these companies in this maybe the electrical vehicle companies and co having to buy components that were not ethically or sustainably sourced because they don't really have much of a choice. So now, what solutions would you say exist for these companies who want to ensure to make sure that their mineral supply is actually sustainable? What solutions would you say exist for them?
Yeah, I think some solutions are evolving in Europe, in particular. Sort of a metal passport. It's like sort of guaranteed to have come from sustainable, responsible sources. And but it comes at a higher cost too, and that's the tough part. Is I don't think consumers are necessarily willing to pay a premium for that sustainably sourced metal. It's a tough one. I mean, on electric vehicles already right now in the U.S., we're seeing a plateau in electric vehicle adoption. I think there are lots of people who wanted to do their part to preserve the environment, immediately went out and bought an electric vehicle. But there's lots and lots of people that have their doubts about them. Number one, anxiety about the range, but also they're more expensive right now than internal combustion vehicles. And so for the average person to spend 25 or 30% more on a vehicle is a tough ask. And then to, then ask them to pay even more for responsibly sourced metal or battery components. I mean, it's probably asking more than people are willing to do.
Okay, so now what's your vision for the future of sourcing these critical minerals sustainably?
Well, from my standpoint, I would like to see America once again realize the importance of mining and raw materials to its country. And I hope it doesn't come to some kind of a crisis like we had in the 1970s with oil. But maybe that's what it takes before America really wakes up and embraces its natural resource producers. But that's personally what I would like to see happen, because I know we do it right here. I know we have the best environmental standards in the world. And so I know that the mining that's done here is done right. But at the same time, we need to push everyone around the world to be responsible, because it does affect all of us.
Okay, so now for the listeners who have been listening to this for the past few minutes, what message would you like to leave with them about the future of these critical minerals? What would you like them to know? What would you like them to take away from this episode?
Well, the main takeaway, I hope, is that people realize how important metals are to our everyday life. We have a saying here in Alaska that is, if it can't be grown, then it must be mined. And when you think about it, literally everything around you came out of the ground. But people don't really realize it. They're happy when they plug their computer into the wall and the power's there, but they don't seem to understand that all that power came from metals that were mined. So that's the big takeaway. But the second big takeaway is that if we're going to electrify our society, it's going to take an absolutely enormous amount of metal. And we really need to try to get it right from the start. 100 years ago in North America, we didn't know better. The mining industry made environmental messes all over the place, some of which we still have to live with today. We didn't know any better. I think even though globally we're a much more modern society and people do know better, but if the rules aren't there, they're taking advantage and producing the metal as cheaply as possible at the expense of the environment. And we have to stop that as a society. We've got to change everybody's mind around the world about that.
Okay, I think that's a good one. So now, a lot of listeners who started this episode had no idea about critical minerals, and by the time they listen to everything we had to talk about, the processes, the difference between the weights mined in different places, and how important they are for our daily lives, they want to learn more about this topic. So, for listeners who want to learn more about this topic, new developments, new technology improvements, and everything in this critical mineral space, how would you say they can stay informed about the space?
Yeah, well, for my own part, I'm always learning about new topics, and I just Google what I'm interested in, and I just find myself going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And there's endless reading to do about metals, that's for sure.
Okay, so that's amazing. So Google, check around, and you can learn as much as you can, as you
Yeah,
want to, about this topic. So now, for
no
the
doubt.
listeners who want to learn more about you, who want to connect with you, who want to see more about what you're doing and learn more from you, you've taught me a lot in this last maybe 30 minutes, and I'm sure people want to learn more from you about this topic and other things you talk about. So, what was the best way those people can connect with you?
Oh, sure. They can easily find Alaska Energy Metals website, and read about our project here in Alaska and the critical metals we've found. And yeah, there's always you can request information through our website if they want, and we're quite happy to share.
All right, so the Alaska Energy Metals website will be on the screen for those watching on video and in the show notes for those listening to this episode. So thank you so much, Greg, for coming on this episode, for sharing your wisdom, your time, and everything today.
My pleasure, Peter. Great talking to you.
Thank you. And for the listeners, I'm sure you've learned a lot about critical minerals, nickel and coal, why they are important. You know, you mentioned they're used in the cathode of batteries, which are used in our inverter systems, our electric vehicles, and everything. And like you said, they have a better range than other metals. He talked about how they are sourced in other places and how they are sourced in the US, and where we have better environmental regulations around these things. And I think where I'm from, I actually studied gas engineering, petroleum engineering, so I've experienced a lot of the environmental issues that come with this mining. So if you've learned a lot about this topic, you want to learn more, and you want to learn more about the green tech space, listen to more episodes of this podcast. And till next week when we're out with a new episode, bye for now.